Welcome to Security Plus Objective 1.2, Fundamental Security Concepts. Picture a real exam question. It names one control, like encryption or a load balancer, and asks which concept it serves. Almost every other topic on this exam stands on the ideas in this objective, so learn them as mental models, not flat definitions, and the rest of the test gets easier. Here is the map. We cover the CA Triad, non-repudiation, the AAA model of authentication, authorization and accounting, gap analysis, zero trust, physical security, and deception technology. The exam tests every one of these by naming a control and asking which concept it serves. One warning before we start. The distractor pattern on this objective is a near synonym from the same family. Authentication versus authorization, policy engine versus enforcement point, deterrent versus detective. Your job is to pick the single best fit, not the answer that is merely related. First, the CIA Triad. Every control you will ever study maps back to one of these three goals, so this is the foundation of everything else. CA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Three co-equal goals, and nearly every control serves at least one of them. A control can strengthen one leg while doing nothing for the others, which is exactly why the exam asks you to name the single leg a control mostly serves. Confidentiality means information is only visible to people and systems authorized to see it. You get there with encryption, both at rest and in transit, with access controls that check authorization before handing over data, with data classification labels like public or confidential, and with masking and tokenization that swap real data for stand-in values in test systems. Two terms people mix up here. Masking replaces the data permanently, so the original is gone. Tokenization swaps in a reversible token that maps back to the real value inside a secure vault. A confidentiality failure looks like a leaked database or a misconfigured cloud bucket, exposing records to the internet. Integrity means data has not been changed in an unauthorized way, and that you can tell if it has. Hashing produces a fingerprint of a file, and any change flips the output. Digital signatures add origin proof on top of that. Version control and change logs record who changed what. And input validation stops bad input from corrupting state before it is ever stored. Here is a subtle one. A ransomware attack looks like an availability problem because you cannot reach your files. But it is also an integrity failure because you can no longer trust the data you have. Availability means systems and data are reachable when they are needed. Redundancy removes single points of failure, like multiple servers behind a load balancer or RAID arrays. Backups with tested restores bring you back after loss. DDoS protection at the edge absorbs traffic floods. Capacity planning sizes systems for peak load. And a UPS plus backup generators ride out power loss. Now the skill the exam really wants. Name the single leg a control mostly serves. TLS is primarily confidentiality. Hashing is primarily integrity. Load balancing is primarily availability. Real controls overlap, but exams want the best single answer. When a question names a single control, do not overthink the overlaps. Encryption hides data, so confidentiality. Hashing detects change, so integrity. Anything that keeps the service reachable, like redundancy or backup power, is availability. Pick the one best leg. Next, a concept the exam loves to slip in right next to integrity, because the two look alike but are not the same. Non-repudiation. Non-repudiation means the originator of an action cannot plausibly deny doing it. A digital signature binds an action to a private key only one person holds, so the signer cannot later disown it. Audit logs with per-user identities and timestamps support it too, and blockchain ledgers make altering recorded history practically impossible. This is the trap. Non-repudiation needs two things together. Integrity, that the record was not tampered with, and authenticity, that the signer really is who they claim to be. A digital signature delivers both. A bare hash proves integrity, but not who created it. So a hash alone is not non-repudiation. Now the AAA model: authentication, authorization, and accounting. It covers every identity interaction on a system, and the exam pulls more questions from here than almost anywhere else in 1.2. AAA is 3 steps. Authentication proves who you are. Authorization decides what you may do. Accounting records what happened. Prove it, get told what you can touch, and have it all logged. Authentication usually means proving a factor. Something you know, like a password or PIN, something you have, like a hardware token or phone. Something you are, like a fingerprint or face. Somewhere you are, like geolocation. And something you do, like your typing rhythm. Multi-factor authentication, MFA, requires factors from different categories. A password plus a one-time code from a token is MFA. But two passwords is not MFA because both are something you know. The exam tests whether the factors come from different buckets. The objective also separates authenticating people from authenticating systems. People use the factors we just covered. Systems and services cannot type a password or show a fingerprint, so they authenticate to each other with certificates, like mutual TLS, with API keys, or with machine accounts. When two services prove identity to each other, the answer is certificate-based, not biometric. Authorization decides what an authenticated identity may do. RBAC assigns permissions to roles, then users to roles. ABAC evaluates attributes like department and clearance in a policy. Rule-based access applies a fixed rule set to everyone, like a firewall list. DAC lets the resource owner decide. An MEC is a system enforced with labels and clearances that users cannot override. Here is the quick separator for the 5 models. Decision by job role is RBAC. By many attributes is ABAC. A fixed rule for everyone is rule-based. Owner discretion is DAC. And non-overridable labels and clearances, like military top-secret systems, that is MAC. Accounting is the third A, recording what happened with logs, metrics, and audit trails. Without accounting, you cannot prove the first 2 A's, and you have no evidence for an investigation or for non-repudiation. A log that says user Smith opened a privileged shell at 1402 and ran 3 commands, that is accounting. Authentication and authorization are the most confused pair on this objective. Authentication asks, who are you? Authorization asks, what are you allowed to do? The classic trap. A user logs in with a valid badge and password, then is denied the finance share. That is an authorization failure, not authentication. The login already passed. Before you build controls, you have to know what you are missing. That is gap analysis. A gap analysis compares where you are today against a target state. The target can be an internal policy, a compliance requirement, or a framework like the NIST Cybersecurity Framework or the CS controls. The exam's trigger phrase is compare current state to a desired or required state. The steps run like this. Pick the target. Inventory your current controls against each item. Score each one as met, partial, or not met. Prioritize the gaps by impact and effort. Then build a remediation roadmap with owners and dates. The deliverable is a prioritized list of what is missing. Now the biggest topic on this objective, with the most named components to memorize, zero trust. Take your time here. The old perimeter model said everything inside the network is friendly and everything outside is hostile. Zero trust flips that. Trust nothing by default and verify every request every time. Its 3 principles are verify explicitly, use least privilege, and assume breach. Zero trust splits the architecture into 2 planes, and one simple rule carries you through the whole topic. The control plane decides. The data plane enforces. Hold on to that. Start with the control plane, where decisions are made. The policy engine is the brain. It evaluates the request against policy and outputs allow, deny, or revoke, and it never touches packets. The policy administrator is the messenger. It sets up or tears down the session and relays the verdict. The engine plus the administrator together form the policy decision point. 3 more control plane concepts. Adaptive identity means authentication strength flexes with risk. 1 factor from a managed device on the corporate network, but step up MFA when the same account logs in from a new country. Threat scope reduction means continuously shrinking what each subject can reach, so a compromised account has a small blast radius. And policy-driven access control means the rules are expressed as policy tied to roles, attributes, and risk. Now the data plane, where the traffic actually flows. The subject or system is the requester, a user, process, or app. The policy enforcement point, the PP, is the gate that actually allows or blocks the connection. And the implicit trust zone is what you can reach once you are past the PP. Keep those zones small, so passing one gate does not hand over the whole network. Walk the full request flow. A subject in an untrusted zone requests access through the PEP. The PEP forwards it to the policy administrator, which consults the policy engine. The engine decides, the administrator relays the verdict back, and the PEP enforces it. Decision in the control plane, enforcement in the data plane. This is the single most tested trap on the whole objective. The policy engine decides, but it never touches packets. The policy enforcement point blocks. If an answer says the policy engine stops the connection, it is wrong. Decision lives in the control plane, enforcement lives in the data plane. Logical controls mean nothing if someone just walks off with the server. Onto physical security, where the exam wants you to recognize each control and whether it deters, detects, or prevents. Start at the perimeter and work in. Fencing marks and hardens the boundary. Bollards are those sturdy posts that stop a vehicle from being driven into an entrance while letting people walk through. An access control vestibule, also called a man-trap, lets one person through at a time and defeats tailgating, because the inner door will not open until the outer door closes. And an access badge on a reader ties entry to an identity and produces an entry log. Notice what a badge reader actually gives you. Only valid cards open the door, that is access control. Every entry is tied to a person and logged, that is accounting. And you can revoke one card instantly. Access control plus accounting in a single device. A few more, and watch whether each one deters, detects, or prevents. Video surveillance plus signage does double duty. Visible cameras deter, and footage is detective evidence after the fact. A security guard adds human judgment for ambiguous situations. And lighting is a cheap deterrent that also makes your cameras and guards actually useful by removing the cover of darkness. Sensors detect intrusion, and the objective names 4 types you must tell apart. Infrared detects body heat, best in small controlled areas. Pressure triggers on weight crossing a mat or floor plate. Microwave emits pulses, covers large areas, and sees through some obstacles. Ultrasonic bounces high-frequency sound and is used for short-range proximity. And stack these controls. A badge reader plus a camera plus a vestibule is a layered control set. That is defense in depth, where the failure of one layer does not defeat the whole system. Last topic, and a favor to question writers because the names sound so similar: deception and disruption technology. Get the sizes straight, and these become easy points. Teams plant decoys to catch attackers and waste their time. A honeypot is a whole decoy system that looks valuable but exists only to be attacked. A honeynet is an entire fake network of honeypots for studying multi-host attacks. A honey file is a tempting document that fires an alert when opened. And a honey token is fake credentials or records seeded across the environment. There is also the DNS sinkhole. It redirects requests for known malicious domains, so infected hosts beacon to your monitoring instead of the attacker's real command and control server. It disrupts the malware and hands you a list of infected internal hosts. Here is why honey tokens are the go-to detection answer. Real users and real services never touch a honey token. So any use of one is a high-confidence breach signal with almost no false positives. When a question describes a planted credential that triggers an alert when used, the answer is honey token. That is the whole objective. Let's lock it in with the memory hooks that win you the closed call questions. First half, CIA Triad. Confidentiality keeps it secret, integrity keeps it unaltered and detectable, availability keeps it reachable, and you match a control to one best leg. Non-repudiation needs integrity plus authenticity together. So a signature gives it, but a bare hash does not. And AAA. Authentication proves identity. Authorization grants access. Accounting records it. A valid login denied an action, failed authorization. Second half. Gap analysis compares current state to a target and delivers a prioritized list of what is missing. Zero trust. The policy engine decides. The PP enforces, so the mnemonic is the engine writes the verdict. The PP slams the gate. Memorize the 4 sensor types and that the vestibule defeats tailgating. And honey tokens and honey files are near zero false positive tripwires, your go-to detection answer. Now go practice it. All of Domain 1 is free at SecPlusMastery.com, with lessons, practice questions, and hands-on labs. Drill these distinctions until the near synonym distractors stop fooling you, and this objective becomes free points on exam day.